All right, cue the music.
Here we go. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Walking Together podcast. This is Kyle. Glad to be hanging out with y'all today. I am here with Nick and Michael.
Hey.
And guys, we are going to continue on our little trilogy of the Gathering. What do we call it? Motto? Is that what we've been calling it?
Mission
Tagline?
statement.
Mission statement? Vision statement? But everybody's seen it. Loving God, living Jesus, walking together. Today we're on part 2. We've talked about loving God. Today we're talking about living Jesus. And either next week or the week after we'll talk about walking together. But living Jesus. So we kind of talked about where it comes from on the last one, right? Loving God. Jesus says it in Matthew 22. It's also in the Shema back in Deuteronomy. Can you read it for us, Nick? You got it pulled up?
Yeah.
All right.
Matthew 22, starting verse 37. Jesus is replying to the question, "Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses?" And Jesus tells them, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments."
That's a pretty hefty statement.
Is Matthew 22, 37 through 40.
So, you want to do a little recap on loving God before we jump into it?
So, loving God, if God is our first priority, should be your first priority, right? So,
Right.
How do you love God? How do you put him first? How do you worship? Because we all worship something,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
whether we realize it or not. And so how do you worship God? We talked about worship. We talked about praise. Worship, that word comes worthship. What do you put your worth in? What do you value? We talked about all those things. And that when it's not just something I have to do.
Right.
Something I get.
Because God gives us free will.
Right.
Which is why it is the greatest love.
Right.
And because of that, it's something that I get to do. God tells us how, and we talked about that, tells us how to praise, how to worship. Psalms is all. David gives us some examples and models and how worship isn't just singing 3 songs on Sunday morning.
Right.
That worship is your life.
Is it singing 4 songs?
No. And how do you live your life that way? By kind of where the second part comes in. Jesus, the author, perfecter, pioneer, trailblazer, like we've been learning in Hebrews,
Right.
of our faith, shows us how to be, because he's fully God and fully man, shows us how to be the ultimate man.
Right.
And how to do that. And so that's where the gospel's kind of, and that living Jesus, by living Jesus, you're going to love God.
Right. Right. Because loving God the way you love him best, and just, I guess to sum it all up, is to do his will. Right. And nobody did the Father's will like Jesus did. He lived God's will.
Amen.
So, and really, the expression of our love for God is how we live on a daily basis, right? And so I think that's where, because none of us 3 came up with the tagline, slogan, mission statement.
No.
It was already in place whenever we all got here. But I think that's where Bobby was coming from whenever he first penned it, right? Was that it's our expression, because that's kind of the identity statement for the gathering, is that we're a worship community of people who love God.
Of passionate
Yeah, that's it.
people We're a worship community of passionate people who love God by doing the praise, the worship, glorifying Him.
Right.
Um,
And living Jesus is the expression of that, because I mean,
And
we get to
that's
worship
the-
anywhere.
the living Jesus is more of the corporate community aspect of that commandment, the second commandment, loving your neighbor.
Right.
And so, yes, it came from God.
Right. Right.
Bobby just put it in a way.
In a Baptist way. 3 points.
If you're Baptist, you're laughing with us, and if you're not, you're probably confused. But anyway, put something in the comments and we'll explain. Yeah. So
Sorry.
loving your neighbor. It's funny because I had a flashback to my grandpa, and he. I remember being little. I remember being like 8 years old, and it's like a sermon is an introduction, 3 points,
Uh-huh.
and an invitation.
That's right.
That's a
Amen.
countdown to lunch.
Amen. That's right.
I remember that all too well.
Oh, man. Yeah. You throw in a 4th point, man. People are lost.
No, they're going to be tapping their watch.
Yeah. They're looking at you.
That's right.
We laugh about it. It all goes back to what are you putting your worth in,
Right.
and are you dying to
Yep.
yourself?
Right.
And so let's get into this living Jesus point. How do you live Jesus? What is living Jesus?
So I think it goes back to something that you say very often, is that it's simple, but it ain't easy. Because what I think, whenever you live Jesus, that means that you're not living for yourself.
You're not living Kyle.
Right. Exactly. So it requires a little bit of dying to yourself in there. And not really a little, but a lot. Completely.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, so like what does that look like? And there was a verse that immediately set of verses that popped in my head when we were talking about this, and it's Colossians 3 verses 1 through 4, if I can read that for us real quick. It says, "If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth, for you have died." And that's the key verse right here, key portion. "For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with him in glory." So that's the only way that you can actually live Jesus, is to not live Kyle, Michael, Nick. Insert your name here. I mean, that requires you giving up all. That just requires a complete and total surrender and submission, right? Which again is simple. It's just not easy.
So I heard that before, and I was thinking back, and just my question would be, how do you die to yourself? And because that was my question. Like, I understand what you're saying, but I don't know how to do that.
Right.
And not only do I not know how to do that, I don't want to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So where do I start?
Let's see. What does surrender look like?
So where I started was by praying,
Yeah.
God, I don't know how to surrender.
Yeah.
I don't want to surrender, but I know I need you, and I know I need to surrender. So would you help me? Would you show me?
Right.
Mm.
Yep.
And it started from there.
Right.
So you don't have to be a theologian or a pastor,
That's right.
or you don't have to necessarily know anything about the Bible to surrender.
Yeah.
And when you then do it and begin to realize how much God loves you, it is overwhelming. Like, God, you set this up in a way that somebody like me who does not care about you, who does not want to die to themselves, who does not love you, can begin to realize who you are and who you created me to be.
Right.
It's hard to explain.
Right. It's realizing that there's something better.
Yeah.
And shifting your focus from I've got everything I need to I don't have anything in reality, and Christ has it all.
And I think that's part of the reason why Jesus, in the Beatitudes, in the Sermon on the Mount, said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit."
He's not talking about financially.
Nope.
And it's that's a whole nother podcast.
Right.
The Beatitudes and
Oh,
Sermon on the Mount.
That'd be a whole series.
Well, you could spend a year on that. But live in Jesus. So you need to die to yourself.
Right.
To begin to be that representative of Christ, and to try to figure out what an example of Christ was in, I think about the vine and the branches in John chapter 15,
Right.
And in John chapter 17, when he's praying and Jesus is talking about, I'm in them and you are in me and I'm in you and we're in them. When he's saying that whole thing, and it sounds kind of confusing.
Yeah.
But what he's saying is, if you remain in me, I only say what the Father tells me to say.
Right.
And you're only you want to know God and know me.
Right.
You want to know God's personality. You want to know who God is. Then die to yourself and follow Jesus.
Right.
And so he gave us this wonderful, I hate even calling it a book, because it's not. It's a library of books.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's an instruction manual on life.
Basic instructions before you leave Earth. You ever heard that?
No,
I haven't heard that.
but there you go.
So let me ask you then: what are the things that you can specifically kill off? What do you need to? Because I think it actually says it in there. He said, "Love the Lord with all your love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength." So, what are the things that you are doing? What are the things in your own heart that need to be put to death that aren't of God? What are the things in your soul? What are the things in your mind? And what are the things that you're doing in your own strength that you don't need to?
So something that helped me was trusting somebody enough, or having somebody ask me, "Hey, Kyle, you are ready to die to yourself, or you want to try."
Right.
Okay. Well, what does a day in the life of Kyle look like? From the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. You remember that whole thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And truthfully, as honest as you're going to be is as much as you're going to get out of it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So, and if you don't have anybody, then that's where I would start, is spending time with somebody and getting to know them or trusting them, right? So if you have to start there, start there.
Right.
But when I wrote down, or even thought about my day, well, I don't read my Bible. How am I going to know God?
Right.
I don't like reading my Bible. So then I had to back up. Lord, and then I started, Lord, I don't like reading my Bible because I don't understand it, and I need you to help me.
Right.
That was the whole reason I went to school.
Yeah.
Because I hate school. Hated school.
Yep.
But I knew how much God loved me, and I knew that He deserved for me to at least try.
Right. Ooh. Yep.
So I just started trying, and that's all I really.
That's all she wrote.
It's easy. It's simple. Sorry.
I was about to say, it ain't
It was
easy.
not easy. It's still not easy.
Right.
But so then something I want to caution everybody is you'll start doing that and you'll start getting these spiritual victories and you'll start beginning to see God's love and you'll get overwhelmed and you'll get caught up in the Spirit and you'll do things like get baptized and
Right.
or get saved and get baptized or maybe you've walked away from the faith and you'll come back to the faith and you'll get baptized again by the Holy Spirit, or you'll have this revelation with God and you'll get called back to Him, and then you'll think you kind of graduated or you're sanctified, and now I'm praying and I'm reading my Bible and I'm in this good routine or habit, and I'm not such an a-hole as I was to my girlfriend or my wife or whoever or my kids, and so now I'm pretty good. So I can kind of
You can relax.
take my foot off the gas and put her on cruise control, and
There's a great temptation to do
getting that lead toboggan. Y'all ever heard that?
What?
When I'm driving and my head's nodding, I'll tell Chrissy, well, I just put on my lead toboggan.
I ain't never heard
Anyway, I didn't mean to get off.
No, I mean, but that's a good point.
You think you've graduated. You think, and you don't mean to, but you think like I can take a break, but it's a daily dying.
Right.
And then what so the reason Ephesians, if you've never read Ephesians, you need to read Ephesians to understand a bunch of things, but mainly the unity of the body and why it's important to have people around you and to be a body, because we all need each other and each body part has a function, and putting on the armor of God, and it just reminds you it's a daily thing.
Right.
And if you don't have people around, you're going to talk yourself into and out of things all the time.
Yep.
You're going to go in a circle more, and there's not going to be anybody there to catch you or to help you or to say, hey, brother, I love you enough to tell you what you don't want to hear because I don't care what you think about me.
Yep.
And
that comes to the walking together, though.
Yes. Sorry. But living Jesus, so we've talked about dying to yourself.
Right.
And Jesus gives that command to the disciples, right?
Right.
Take up your cross and follow me.
Yep.
Was it Peter and John? There's 4 fishermen, right?
Yeah. Sons of Thunder.
James
and John.
John, Peter, Andrew.
Yep.
Yeah. So he calls 4 fishermen, kind of, and tells them, leave everything.
Right.
So you have to be willing to let go of everything.
Right. Yep.
You can't just add Jesus to your life. You have to make him your life.
And that's why I love that verse, man. Because it says when Christ who is your life. I mean, there's no caveat there. There's no asterisk. There's nothing that says
Jesus,
like when it doesn't say when Christ who is part of your life, when Christ who is someone you hang out with on Sundays, and it says when Christ who is your life.
Amen. So the other side of that I think about is if you're trying to do that,
right?
How in living Jesus, how can we be the best representation of Him to others?
Right. So this is that leads into a part that I was going to talk about. And so loving God is like a personal expression,
Yeah.
right? Living Jesus is the like an outward expression towards others. And so that's where the living Jesus can sometimes get a little bit complicated and messy, is because it involves people, right? So living Jesus is never going to be an easy thing. It's going to be simple, but it's just not easy. Because in theory, and in our own plans and in our own thought processes and everything works out really smoothly. But that's just not life. But I mean, we still have that command to live Jesus. And so since we've been put to death, living for Christ, and I think the best way to look at that is, I mean, how did Jesus live? I mean, that's what we said last time, is, not to put it in a corny way, but like, what would Jesus do? Like, asking ourselves seriously in every moment, what would Jesus do? Because if we want to live Jesus, that's got to be the question in the back of our mind.
Yeah, and you saying that just reminded me, like, that's why it's a daily, like, we forget so much so fast.
Right.
Right now, off the top of my head, I can't even tell you the Beatitudes.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, constantly being reminded, if I want to be a representative of Christ, I need to know his example.
Right.
And so daily, I need an example of that. And so he gives it to us through his word.
Right.
And that motivates me.
Yeah.
Because then it's not just some habitual thing that I do because it's what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
The other side, the people side of that, people are terrible. And guess what? I'm one of them.
Right.
So
we're all a bunch of sinners.
Keep that in mind. Give each other grace.
Yep.
Try again.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's what Jesus did. You got something to say, Michael?
I think the whole, like, what would Jesus do? We all remember having those bracelets and whatnot.
Right.
That fad. But I was thinking, on Sunday mornings, I do AV here, in case you're listening and you don't know me. But Sunday mornings, I'm going. And I think everybody around the church is we're focused on this goal, and working in audio visual, equipment goes out, and it's in my nature to just say, oh, I'll fix it, or I'll, run and take care of it myself. I'm not thinking like, whenever I'm trying to explain to a volunteer, I'm not thinking about grace. I'm thinking about getting it done.
Right. Oh yeah.
As Larry the Cable Guy would say,
get her done.
Well, that just goes back to, it's a daily thing.
Yeah.
Right.
You take off the old and put on the new, like a coat every day.
Yep.
That's in Ephesians
right.
as well.
Yeah.
Michael, you had a verse.
Yeah. I thought we were going to make it there earlier, but it's so Ephesians 4 talks about the unity of the body of believers in Christ, and Ephesians 5 starts out with, therefore be imitators of God as dearly loved children, and walk in love as Christ also loved us and gave himself for us, a sacrificial and fragrant offering to God. That dying to yourself and taking off that coat, and whoo.
You say in that last part in my Bible, I wrote beside that verse, how do you smell?
Yeah, a sacrificial and fragrant offering.
Do I smell pleasing to God, or do I stink?
Ooh.
Because my attitude and my heart, do they stink?
Yeah.
And it can. The reason I wrote that question is because every time I'm asking myself, how do you smell?
Yeah.
Yep.
I smell pleasing to the Lord.
That's good. 'Cause
I hope I smell like sandalwood.
what's that fragrance from Yankee Candle? Midnight something.
Midnight skies.
Yeah, something like
Something
that.
Yeah.
It's the
The
dark.
black one.
Yeah, the black one. I don't remember.
I don't remember it. No, man. There ain't too many smells that smell greater than Aloha.
Look, we're about to get
Yeah.
going.
But yeah, that was Ephesians 5:1.
No,
5,
be
1 and 2.
imitators, though. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where that WWJD came from, though.
Yeah.
You know, it's because that is the only way to live Jesus, is to think and do like Jesus did. And I mean, if you were to let me ask y'all, if y'all were to sum up Jesus' life in 2 sentences, how would you do it? We can flex on the 2 sentences a little bit, but if you were to sum it up, though, what did he do?
I think of a prayer that I've heard. He lived the life we couldn't live, but died the death that we deserve.
Right.
Yeah, that's the gospel. That's the good news. That's the great
Right.
news. That is, he came down. He gave up heaven
Mm-hmm.
and came to earth for me, for you, to die a death we should have died.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
He covered us up on the cross
Right.
and took the keys from hell.
Yep.
I don't know a better love story, a better superhero story than that.
Right. And in doing those things, he loved God and loved others.
Yeah.
And that's what living Jesus looks like.
And that is why, like, when he's in the garden before they're coming to arrest him and he's praying, it shows his full humanity, but it also shows, like, his surrender and his willingness to God. Like, God, if there's any other way, let's do it. Let's do that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But your will be done,
Right.
because I know who you are.
Right.
And it's not about me.
Right.
And I believe, we talked about it a little bit Wednesday, but he had ultimate joy when he was on the cross because he fully fulfilled his purpose.
Right. Yeah.
And so when you surrender like that, when you follow that model and you fully surrender, you full sin, that is when you have the most joy. When you, and it doesn't matter, fear. Another way it is said is God places the biggest rewards on the maximum side of fear or faith.
Yeah.
However you want to say it.
Yep. Yep.
Because you're giving up all of you for a greater purpose.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, of all people, Shia LaBeouf, even Stevens, right? Anybody remember Disney
Holes.
Channel?
I was thinking
Holes, Transformers.
Yeah.
Well, if you've noticed, he hasn't been in a movie
Right.
a long time.
Hot minute.
He's only done one movie. And
Is that Peanut Butter Falcon?
and so Peanut Butter Falcon, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just look him up on YouTube. He does an interview with Bishop Barron. He does an interview with John Barenthal. And he kind of gives his testimony and why he's been missing. And he does this Padre Pio Saint. Padre Pio. It's like a Franciscan monk. That's the only movie he's doing. Anyway, Shia LaBeouf is explaining this. Found Christ and explains, like, how he would have lived his life differently if he would have known that
Right.
earlier.
Yeah.
But there's true joy in doing something that costs a lot.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So,
Especially everything that you are.
yeah.
Yeah. I think the last thing that we were going to really mention was, because going back to that Colossians 3 passage, seek the things that are above. Right. And I think all in all, we've probably covered it, but
I was just,
what does that look like though, to specifically seek the things that are above? Because I think, again, Jesus is the perfect example here. We've got the Hebrews verse right there, fixing our eyes on Jesus, who is the author and perfecter of our faith. He was perfect at it, so he sought the things that were above, and that's like chasing after God and the things that he cares about, and his will, right?
Yeah.
So really, if I had to give a short answer of that, of seeking the things that are above, I think that would be it. It's just seeking out God's will in every area and aspect of life, and surrendering to the point where that's all that's left.
So there's a hymn that I love, and I don't love a lot of hymns.
They're so good.
They are.
But turn your eyes upon Jesus.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite ones. And so Jesus ascended back to heaven. So when it says fix your eyes on things above, just like the hymn says, turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wondrous grace, and the things of this world will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. And another way to say, look up instead of around.
Right.
Yeah.
Because when you're looking up, when you fix your eyes on Jesus, when you set your mind on things above, you don't have time for the stuff around you to distract you.
Right.
Everything else doesn't matter.
Yep.
Ooh, I kind of got chills on that, to be honest.
Everything else grows.
When we sing
dim.
that hymn on Sunday corporately,
Yeah.
I feel like I can levitate.
Yeah.
When you hear everybody singing it,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I mean, it's a out-of-body experience almost.
We had to tell Jared we're going to have to pull an audible.
Yep. I'll let Scott know.
It's like an anthem.
Yeah. Honestly, though, yeah. All joking aside, it's one of my favorites, too.
So that's kind of what, we could go into all the details or examples of what are things are above, but just to summarize it, to simply put it, and it goes back to what you put in is what's going to come out. So heavenly things that are eternal. What are some things that are eternal? God.
Heaven.
Jesus.
Sunday school answers. Yeah.
But so what else is eternal?
No. There's very few.
So that's why, I meant for it to be cliche or whatever.
Yeah.
But it ain't easy, but it's simple. It's not rocket surgery.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think we've wrapped this one up, y'all.
If you have any questions, comments about anything we've said or that maybe we haven't fully explained to your understanding, please email those, put them in the comments on the podcast wherever you listen to it, and we'd love to respond to you. This has been the Walking Together podcast. Thank you for listening. You can like, subscribe, share this podcast, rate it, give us a 5-star rating. More people can see it.
And it can be an honest 5-star review. If you think it sucked, you can say that, but
Yeah.
it just hurt our feelings.
But if you give it
still give us
5
5
stars,
stars.
more people will see that you thought it was bad.
Exactly.
If that makes any sense. Questions, not just about this episode, but future episodes or something you have a question about, whether it was from Sunday or about life, struggles, anything. We would love to try to answer it.
Yeah.
And
Send it to.
you can send it to thegathering, surfcity.com/podcast.
Well, that's
or
where
you
they
can
can find it.
email it to podcast@thegatheringsurfcity.com.
Minus the.
Minus the podcast with an S
Yeah.
with us at gatheringsurfcity.com. Thank y'all for listening. We love you. We're out.
Later.